Imagine a vast island where golden palaces gleam and the walls of temples shine with silver. Elephants walk through the streets. The canals are filled with ships and kings decide the fate of the world. It seemed like paradise on earth. But one day, in a single day and night, everything vanished beneath the water. This is how Plato, the great philosopher of antiquity, told the world about the mysterious Atlantis. The story is more than 2000 years old, but it still haunts scientists, sailors, and dreamers. Watch until the end, and you'll learn the most important thing: why Plato invented this myth and why he made it so vivid, as if he had visited the sunken island himself. Atlantis began as a gift from the gods. Poseidon, the lord of the seas, fell in love with a mortal woman named Plato. From their union, 5 pairs of twins were born. The eldest son, Atlas, received power over the main throne, and his name was given to the entire island and the ocean around it. That's how Atlantis came to be. The island was enormous, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. There were high mountains, fertile plains, and forests full of animals. Even elephants lived there, although their homeland is Africa and Asia. The Atlanteans could do everything: build temples and palaces, dig canals and bridges, and create statues from gold and silver. In their temples, the ceilings were made of ivory, and the walls were of a rare metal called orichalcum, which shone no less brightly than gold. The center of the island was like a fortress. Around it were earthen embankments and moats filled with water. Canals connected these rings, and thousands of ships sailed along them, and at the very heart stood the Temple of Poseidon, almost 200 meters long and 90 meters wide. For comparison, the Temple of Artemis, one of the wonders of the world, was smaller. The walls of the temple gleamed with silver, the floors shimmered with orichalcum, and in the center towered a statue of Poseidon in a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses. But this was not just an island of wealth. Atlantis had a powerful army and a huge fleet. Plato wrote that the royal part alone could field 60,000 warriors and 20,000 ships. Even if the numbers are exaggerated, one thing is clear: this was a superpower of its time. The kings of Atlantis gathered for a council every 6 years. They made sacrifices and swore to uphold the order established by the gods. None of them had the right to wage war against each other. But everything changed when wealth corrupted their hearts. The Atlanteans became greedy and cruel and began to seize foreign lands. They subjugated everything around them, from Egypt to Italy. Their army grew, and cities surrendered one after another. But when they marched on Athens, everything went off plan. The Greeks, though they lost many warriors, managed to stop the invincible Atlantis. It was a defeat that marked the beginning of the end. And then, according to Plato, Zeus intervened. The supreme god grew angry with the Atlanteans and decided to punish them. In a single night and day, the island disappeared beneath the water. Earthquakes, waves, storms, all swallowed up the wealthy world. Where the luxurious kingdom once stood, only shoals and silt remained, hindering ships from sailing. Thus ended the story of the great island. But did it really end? Let's find out. Plato wrote about this more than 2000 years ago, but not a single Greek or Egyptian historian of his time confirmed the existence of Atlantis. Even Herodotus, the father of history, was silent. Plato's student Aristotle also did not believe in this myth. He said, "Plato is my friend, but truth is dearer." And here is the main question: why did Plato invent this story? Did he want to describe a real island, or was it a lesson? Or was it a political allegory? How exactly did the myth of Atlantis survive through the centuries? Why do people still believe in it? And what archaeological discoveries have made people think that the sunken city might still exist today? Centuries passed, ancient Greece fell, the Roman Empire came and went, but Plato's story of the sunken island did not disappear. The story seemed to be waiting for its time, and then came the age of great geographical discoveries. People once again began searching for unknown lands. In 1484, the Italian scholar Marsilio Ficino translated Plato's works, and Atlantis came alive again on the pages. And just a few years later, Christopher Columbus set out on his voyage. Columbus was searching for a route to India, but instead discovered a new world, America. And then many began to whisper, what if America is actually Atlantis? Plato wrote, "From Atlantis, it was easy to sail to other islands and to the great continent beyond the ocean." For Europeans, this sounded like a direct reference to America. At first, Atlantis began to be compared to the Aztecs in Mexico. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, stood right on an island, surrounded by canals and bridges. Huge pyramids towered over the city, and life bustled just as in Plato's legend. Even their god Quetzalcoatl, the white god of the east, according to legend, sailed in from across the sea. Isn't that a hint? But the Spanish destroyed this city, and along with it, wiped out the Aztecs' written record. All we know comes from the accounts of the conquistadors, and they were amazed at how much the Aztec capital resembled the description of Atlantis. Decades later, the myth of the sunken island began to be linked to other civilizations as well. Some said Atlantis was with the Maya, others searched for it among the Incas in the Andes. Still others believed it was hidden underwater near the Bahamas or the Canary Islands. Every time people discovered pyramids, statues, or ancient ruins, they would remember Atlantis again and again. Some believed these were its colonies. Some claimed that the Atlanteans themselves survived and passed their knowledge on to other peoples. A bit later, I'll tell you how one man in the 19th century gathered all these versions and made Atlantis the symbol of an entirely new science, which would be called Atlantology. The 19th century. The world is changing. Steamships, railways, and the telegraph are appearing. People feel that progress gives them power, and more often they ask themselves, if we can discover new lands, then why not find Atlantis? And so, in 1882, the American politician and writer Ignatius Donnelly publishes a book that changes everything. It's called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. This book becomes a sensation. Donnelly claims that Plato did not invent a myth at all, but told a true story. He says, Atlantis is the cradle of all ancient civilizations. From there came knowledge of construction, agriculture, medicine, and even the stars. According to Donnelly, the Egyptians, Maya, Inca, Sumerians, all of them inherited part of Atlantis' legacy. That's why different peoples have similar flood myths and identical pyramids. He writes, the gods of the ancients are actually the kings of Atlantis, whose deeds became legends, and people believed it. His book went through dozens of editions and was read in America, Europe, and even in Russia. Atlantis stopped being just a page from Plato and became a scientific sensation. This is how a new science was born, Atlantology. After that, people began searching for Atlantis in earnest. Some believed that the remnants of the island were the Azores, others pointed to the Canary Islands, and some were convinced that America itself was Atlantis. But it wasn't just writers and philosophers who became fascinated by this idea. Archaeologists also caught the wave. Heinrich Schliemann, the very man who discovered Troy, suggested that Atlantis might have been there in Turkey. And later, at the beginning of the 20th century, the English archaeologist Arthur Evans excavated the palace of Knossos on Crete and found traces of the Minoan civilization. It turned out to be so similar to Plato's description that many people said, here it is, the real Atlantis. The Minoans had a powerful fleet, a developed culture, a bull cult, and even their own palace labyrinths. And all of this perished after the terrible eruption of the Santorini volcano, when ash covered the sky and waves washed away entire cities. Could it be that Plato simply retold the story of the Minoans? This question still troubles scholars to this day. Now let's figure out how the 20th century, the age of science and technology, turned Atlantis into a myth that people search for even underwater using bathyscaphs and satellites. The 20th century became the age of science, technology, and great discoveries. But it was precisely during this time that the myth of Atlantis resounded louder than ever before. In 1900, the archaeologist Arthur Evans discovered the palaces of the Minoans on Crete. But no one has ever been able to prove that this is Atlantis. In the middle of the century, true legends of science joined the search. Jacques-Yves Cousteau, the famous explorer of the seas, together with his team, descended into the depths around the island of Santorini. He was searching for sunken cities, walls, and temples. Underwater, they found an ancient port, stone blocks, but not a single inscription, not a single direct piece of evidence. Atlantis slipped away once again. In the Soviet Union, people also became fascinated with the search. The scientist Nikolai Zhirov published a massive book called Atlantis, The Main Problems of Atlantology. He claimed that the island really existed and perished around 9,000 years before our era. Soviet expeditions explored the Atlantic Ocean. They even discovered strange shapes resembling ruins near the underwater Ampere seamount. But later, it turned out that it was simply the work of nature. In the West, they didn't give up either. In the 1960s, the so-called Bimini Road was discovered off the coast of the Bahamas. These are rows of stone slabs underwater. For some, it was an ancient Atlantean road. For others, it was just a natural formation. And at the beginning of the 21st century, discoveries off the coast of Cuba attracted attention. At a depth of more than 700 meters, mysterious structures were discovered, resembling pyramids and walls. Scientists are still debating whether this is an ancient city or a quirk of nature. Just recently, archaeologists in Spain found ruins underwater near Cadiz that resemble the Temple of Poseidon, described by Plato. The walls are more than 6 meters high. Is it a coincidence or a real clue? Each new discovery adds fuel to the fire of the myth. And although most scientists are convinced that Atlantis never existed, millions of people around the world continue to believe. Once again, I ask myself, why has the myth of the sunken island survived for thousands of years? And what did it really turn out to be? Truth, allegory, or a beautiful fantasy? Atlantis has been searched for over 2,000 years. It has been drawn on maps, written about in books, featured in films, and inspired expeditions. But why does a myth born in an ancient Greek dialogue outlive empires and civilizations? For the ancient Greeks, it was a story about pride punished by the gods. For medieval Europe, a warning that any state could fall in an instant. For the Renaissance, Atlantis became a symbol of forgotten knowledge hidden beneath the sea. In the 19th century, it was turned into a romantic legend about a lost civilization, and in the 20th, into a scientific mystery that people tried to solve with scuba gear and bathyscaphs. And yet, the truth remains hidden. Was Atlantis a real place, or is it merely Plato's parable, an invented lesson about the fragility of human pride? Scientists argue, archaeologists dig, and the myth lives on. And perhaps that is precisely the mystery of Atlantis. It will never give a definitive answer. It will keep luring us, slipping away, turning into a legend for every new generation. When modern researchers analyze the myths of ancient peoples, the Native Americans, Egyptians, Sumerians, they found that almost all of them have a story about a great flood. Could this be a memory of a real catastrophe that humanity experienced thousands of years ago? If that's the case, then Atlantis is not a fiction. It's a memory of a lost world, erased by water and time. And as long as people keep searching for answers, the myth will live on. Atlantis is not an island. Atlantis is an eternal question, and in the end the main answer we've been seeking all this time. Why did Plato invent the myth of Atlantis and make it so vivid as if he himself had walked the streets of the sunken island? He did it not for the sake of geography and not for the sake of a fairy tale. Atlantis is not a map, it's a warning. Plato depicted the downfall of a vast and wealthy power so that his contemporaries would reflect on it. His Athens, having defeated Persia and become powerful and greedy, increasingly resembled that very Atlantis. Pride, greed, and the lust for power, these were what he considered the real dangers. That's why the description of Atlantis is so detailed, so vivid. Temples of gold, walls of red stone, canals, a fleet, fields, all of this was created that people would believe, feel, and see the picture of collapse with their own eyes. And the meaning was simple. Any civilization can fall if it forgets about justice. That is why the myth has lived on for thousands of years, because it is not just a story about a sunken island, but an eternal reminder for humanity. Thank you for watching until the end. If you found this interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, and also share this video. In the comments, write about which other historical figures you would like to learn about, or which empires and topics from the past interest you the most. There are even more stories ahead.